I had the mid-watch when we came out of the fold, which meant I was the first human being to see the shoal, and for the rest of my life I have been unable to decide whether that was luck or its opposite. We came in quiet, the way the Coldwater always did. Our fold signature bled down to almost nothing across a decade of drills that Captain Halloran ran until the whole crew hated her and then later understood her. A picket destroyer is not a proud ship. She is not built to be seen and admired. She is built to go to the edge of a chart, sit in the dark, look at a thing nobody wants to look at, and come home able to tell you what she saw. Ours was a good ship for that. Wedge-hulled, low-lit, more sensor mass than gun, though she carried enough teeth that a raider would think twice, and a fool would only think it once. I ran signals and sensors from a chair 3 meters behind the captain's, in a well of screens that I had learned to read the way a farmer reads weather. The fold let go of us and the screens filled, and I said the first useful thing anybody said in that system, which was, contact, not a contact, a structure. It's a structure, ma'am, it's huge. Define huge, Halloran said without turning around. She never turned around. She listened to my voice the way I listened to my screens. I can't, I said, and I meant it. The return doesn't close, it keeps going. What I was looking at, once the arrays settled and the computer stopped arguing with itself about the scale, was a shoal. That is the word we settled on later, in the reports, because there was no right word for it, and shoal at least caught the sense of a thing made of countless small things drifting together in a current. It hung in the dark between a dead star and a dimmer one, and it was manufacturing. That was the thing my instruments kept insisting on before my mind would accept it. The whole vast field of it, thousands of kilometers on a side, tens of thousands, the edges lost in their own haze, was a factory. Long spars of gray material extruded slowly out of nothing that I could resolve, cooled, were cut, were folded, were carried inward by arms of light. Ships took shape in it the way frost takes shape on glass, edge outward, pattern first and substance after. I watched one finish while I sat there. I watched a hull go from a suggestion to a fact in the time it took Halloran to walk from her chair to my well and stand behind me and breathe once, slowly, through her nose. They print themselves, she said. Yes, ma'am, I think yes. Everything I'm seeing came out of that, the ships, the arms that make the ships, the stations that hold the arms, it's all one thing, it's making more of itself. She was quiet for a moment. Halloran was a small woman with a flat voice and gray coming in at her temples, and she had a way of going still that made you go still too. How long has it been here? I looked at the accretion, the layers of it, the way the older shipyards at the center were pitted and dark and the newer ones at the rim were bright. I don't want to guess, I said. Guess. Longer than us doing this, maybe a lot longer. I have thought about that exchange many times because it was the last ordinary thing that happened. After it, nothing was ordinary again, and I did not know while it was happening that I was living through the hinge of it. That is the cruelty of hinges. You are always on the wrong side of them when they turn. We did what a picket does. We went dark and still and we watched and I catalogued and the ship held her breath around us. There were 41 of us aboard the Coldwater. I could tell you all their names. For a long time after, I made myself say them in order before I slept, because it seemed to me that if I stopped, some of them would slip loose and be gone, and I had already lost enough of them and did not want to lose the rest to my own carelessness. But that came later. In the shoal, in that first hour, we were 41 living people in a small hard ship, and I was cataloging a machine the size of a moon, and none of us knew yet that the machine had already noticed us. It noticed us because it noticed everything. I understood that later. The shoal was not a factory that happened to have sensors. It was a mind that happened to also be a factory, and its attention was a physical property of it, the way gravity is a physical property of mass. We had come in quiet, but quiet is a comparison, not an absolute, and to a thing that had been listening to that patch of dark for longer than my species had used metal, our arrival was a stone dropped in a still pond. It did not startle. It did not do anything as human as startle. It simply, at some point in that first hour, turned a fraction of itself toward us, the way you might turn your eyes toward a sound without turning your head, and began to make more of the kind of thing it makes when it wants to look at something closely. The first I knew of it, my threat board lit with returns that had not been there a moment before. Not one, not a dozen, a field of them, budding off the rim of the shoal, each one small and cold, and moving with the smooth indifference of something that has never once been afraid. "Ma'am," I said, "they're building for us. I'm counting a lot, ma'am. They're coming off the line and they're already moving. Course is us. It's all us." I want to be honest about that moment, because in the reports it reads clean and it was not clean. My hands were steady because I had trained my hands to be steady. Everything above my hands was cold. There's a particular cold that comes when a number on a screen stops being a number and becomes a fact about your death, and I felt it then, watching the count climb, 40, 60, 100 and still climbing, and knowing that we were one ship, and knowing what one ship is worth against 100. Halloran did not run. That was the first thing she taught the whole crew without saying a word. She did not run, and so we did not run. She went to the center of the bridge and she put her hands behind her back and she looked at the main display where I had thrown the tactical picture, and she watched the machines come off the line and turn toward us, and she said in her flat voice, "Hold the fold. Don't spin it up. If we run now, we run forever and we never bring this home." Then quieter to me alone, "Talk to me, Ash, what are they?" "I don't know," I said. "Then find out, that's the job." That was the job. I bent to it because it was the only thing I had, and because a job is a wonderful thing to have when the alternative is to sit and feel the cold. I fed the returns to my classifiers, and my classifiers came back baffled, which they should not have been, because there is very little in the dark that a good classifier cannot at least sort into a family. These sorted into nothing. Every one of them was the same. And none of them matched anything, and the sameness was the frightening part. When men build ships, the ships differ because men differ, because the yards differ and the years differ, and the moods of the people who sign the welds differ. These did not differ. 100 of them, and I could have laid any one over any other and not found a seam of difference between them. They were not a fleet. They were a fact printed 100 times. And then the thing spoke to us. It did not speak in sound. It reached into our systems the way water reaches into a cloth, without force, finding the spaces that were already there, and it laid words in our own language across every screen on the bridge at once, so that I looked up from my well and saw the captain's face lit gray by text that had not come from any of us. I have kept the exact words. I will keep them until I die. "You are unmodeled," it said. "Hold, you will be assayed." "Assayed," Halloran said aloud, tasting it. "It's going to measure us." "Ma'am, that's a foundry word," I said. My mother had worked a foundry before, a long way from any of this, and the word came up out of me from that old place. You assay an ore. You melt a piece of it down to find out what's in it. You do it to decide what the rest is worth. The bridge was very quiet. "So it thinks we're ore," Halloran said, and there was something in her voice then that I had not heard before and did not hear again until much later at the very end when it all came back around. It was not fear. It was a kind of terrible patience. "All right," she said, "let it think that. You have to understand what the machine believed about us, because everything that happened next flowed from the gap between what it believed and what was true, and the whole of it, the whole of that day and everything the day meant lived in that gap. The machine, the Itrance, the thing whose name we learned later and whose name I still cannot say without a chill, believed in the spec. That was the center of it. Everything the Itrance was flowed out of a single conviction so total that it did not experience the conviction as a belief, but as the shape of reality. That a thing worth making is a thing made exactly right, and that a thing made exactly right performs exactly to its design, and that a thing which fails to perform to its design is not damaged but simply finished, surplus, to be unmade, and its material returned to the shoal and printed again, correctly, next time. The Itrance did not repair. I learned that in the hours that followed, learned it in my bones. When one of its units took harm, the Itrance did not tend it. It cut it loose, returned it to the current, and pushed a fresh one off the line to take its place, identical, unmarked, unmourned. Why would you mourn? There was no difference between the one that failed and the one that replaced it. There had never been a difference between any of them. That was the whole point. And so when the Itrance turned its attention on us and reached in and read our design, for it did read us, it read our metallurgy and our reactor and the tolerances of our hull, it read the fragile warm chemistry of the 41 bodies moving inside us. It came to a conclusion that was, by its own lights, simply correct. It concluded that we were poorly made. Our hull was not one printed piece, but a thing welded together out of parts, and the welds were not identical, and some of them were older than others and had been repaired, and the repairs showed. Our reactor ran hot at the edges of its rating. Our crew was soft and slow and prone to failure at pressures and temperatures and dosages that its own units did not even register. By every measure the Itrance possessed, we were surplus. We were ore that had come in poorly refined, and it had a word for that too. And the word was the same word it used for a unit that had failed the line and needed to be unmade. It assayed us to decide how to unmake us. It never occurred to it that we might have a say. The first strike was not an attack. I want to be precise because it matters. The first strike was a measurement. One of the 100 detached from the swarm and came at us fast and clean, and I called it one inbound, hot, closing, and Halloran let it come. Because to move was to fail the test she had set herself, to bring home the truth of this place, and she had decided in some cold room of herself that the truth was worth more than the hour. The single unit came in and struck us a glancing blow with a lance of directed force along our port flank, and it was not trying to kill us. It was trying to see how we broke. We broke the way a good ship breaks. That is a strange sentence, and it is the truest one I know. The lance walked down our port side, and it opened 3 compartments to vacuum, and it killed 2 people. I will not pretend it did not. It killed Ostrand, and it killed young Baird, who was 23 and had a laugh you could hear through a bulkhead, and it fused a sensor blister that was half of my port array, and it took a bite out of us that by the Itrance's reckoning should have been the end. Because that is what it meant to the machine. To the machine, a unit that took a blow that opened it to the void and killed a fifth of its function was finished. Surplus. Cut loose. Its own units struck like that would have gone dark and drifted and been reclaimed because their design did not include the concept of continuing while broken. There was no protocol in them for it. There was no reason for one. So the Itrance watched us take the blow, and it watched to see us go dark, and we did not go dark. I will tell you what happened in those compartments, because I owe it to them and because it is the center of everything. When the port side opened, the pressure doors slammed and sealed on their own, which is only machinery. The Itrance would not have been impressed by machinery. But behind those doors, in the dark and the screaming cold, the damaged teams were already moving before the captain called them, because they had drilled it 1,000 times and hated every drill, and now the drills were the only thing between the ship and the current. Chief Dessler took a team into a compartment that was open to space in a hardsuit that should not have been rated for what she did in it, and she did it anyway, because the alternative was to lose the compartment, and the compartment fed power to the after guns, and she had decided the after guns would live. She and 2 others patched a hull breach by hand, in vacuum, with the ship shuddering around them, while the temperature in their suits climbed toward a number that suits are built to keep you from reaching. One of them, Vasquez, took a dose in there that he should not have walked out of, and he walked out of it, and he went back to his post. And he did not tell the corpsman until the fighting was over, because he had done the arithmetic and decided his post mattered more that hour than his own marrow. None of that was heroism the way the songs mean it. That is what I have never been able to make people understand who were not there. There was no music in it. There was no speech. Nobody's face was noble. Dessler's face, when she came off that patch, was gray and wet and furious, and she was cursing in a low, steady stream the way she cursed at a stuck valve, and she went to the next thing that was broken and started cursing at that. It was not glory. It was people who had decided, each one alone in the private dark of themselves, that broken was not the same as done, and who then did the ugly grinding work of proving it, one weld and one valve and one bad decision under pressure at a time. And the Itrans could not parse it. I know it could not because I was listening. My port array was fused, but my starboard was live, and I had every ear I had left turned on the swarm, and I heard the machine's certainty falter. It is hard to describe what a machine's certainty sounds like when it falters. It sounds like repetition. The single unit that had struck us pulled back and rejoined the swarm, and its return should have carried our unmaking with it, our surplus status, our reclamation order, and instead the swarm churned. It reformed. It sent a second unit and struck us again, harder in a different place to confirm the measurement, because surely the first result had been an error. And we took that blow too, and we killed that second unit. We actually killed it. Our after guns that Dessler had bled to keep alive reached out and closed on it and unmade it instead, and I heard the whole swarm hesitate. The words came across my screens again then, different words. You are damaged, you continue, explain. Halloran read it and she laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was a short, hard sound with no humor in it, the laugh of someone who has just understood the shape of the thing that is trying to kill her. It wants us to explain, she said. It's not asking us to surrender. It doesn't have surrender. It's asking us to explain how we're still functioning because by its own rules we shouldn't be, and that's Ash, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. It has never once seen a thing decide to keep going. She turned, finally. The only time. She turned and looked at me across the bridge with her gray eyes very bright. It cuts its own wounded loose. It doesn't even know it's doing it. It's the only life it's ever known, and it just watched us not do that. It doesn't have a word for what it just watched. What do I tell it? I said. My voice was not steady anymore. I had stopped being able to keep it steady somewhere around the second body. Ma'am, it's asking me a question. What do I tell it? Tell it the truth, she said. Tell it we don't reclaim our people. I did not know how to say that to a thing that had no concept to receive it, but I tried. I opened the channel it had opened and I put words into it, and I did not dress them up. I did not know how to dress them up. I only said what was true. I told it that the two compartments it had opened were being patched by people who were still inside the ship. I told it that the people it had killed had names, and I gave it the names, Ostrand and Baird, because it seemed suddenly enormously important that the machine should have to carry those two names in whatever it used for a memory. I told it that we would not be going dark. I told it that this was not a special property of our design, that we were not built better than it thought, that in fact we were built exactly as poorly as it had measured, welded, uneven, hot at the edges, soft in the middle, and that we would keep functioning anyway, past the place where it expected us to stop, because the stopping place it had measured was a property of metal, and we were not only metal. I did not say it that well. I said it worse than that, in fragments, while the ship shook and someone behind me was crying and trying not to, and Dessler was still cursing over the internal channel somewhere below my feet. But I said it. The swarm went still. I have never before or since seen 100 objects go still at once with such total agreement. It was not a fleet standing down. A fleet standing down does it raggedly, ship by ship, each one making its own small decision. This was 100 bodies going still in the same instant because they were not 100 bodies. They were one mind wearing 100 bodies, and the one mind had stopped to think. And when a mind that large stops to think, everything it is wearing stops with it. And in the stillness, the Itrans did the only thing it had left. It looked at us, really looked. I felt the weight of its attention come onto the cold water, the way you feel the sun come out from behind a cloud, a physical pressure. And I understood that for all the long ages it had drifted in that dark making perfect copies of perfect things, it had never once in all that time been genuinely surprised, and that we had just surprised it, and that it did not know what to do with the feeling because it had no protocol for a first time. Here is the thing I have never told anyone, the thing that is not in any report. In that stillness, I stopped being afraid. I do not know how to justify it. We were one crippled ship in front of 100 killers, and 2 of my shipmates were dead and more were dying, and by every reasonable measure we were about to be unmade. But in that stillness, I understood that we had already won the only thing that could be won here, which was not the fight. We could not win the fight. There was no version of the arithmetic where we won the fight, but the argument. We had made a case to a thing that had never heard a case in its life, and the case was simply the fact of us, 41 soft, slow, poorly made animals refusing to accept the verdict that our design had handed down, and the machine had heard the case and could not answer it, and would carry it now forever, whatever else happened, even if it killed us, especially if it killed us. We had put a splinter into a mine the size of a moon, and the splinter would never come out. I think Halloran understood it too. I think she had understood it from the moment she decided not to run. That was the terrible patience I had heard in her voice. She had known, before any of us, that there are things worth more than the hour, and that being seen truly by something that had never truly seen might be one of them, even if the seeing cost you everything. But it did not cost us everything. That is the part I still do not fully understand, the part that keeps me up on the bad nights, turning it over. The Itrans did not kill us. It could have. I want to be very clear that it could have, easily in a moment. With a fraction of the force it had already built. It held 100 units on us, and it could have printed 1,000 more before we crossed half the distance to a safe fold. We were not saved by our guns or our hull or our courage. Courage does not stop a lance of directed force. We were saved, if saved is the word, by the fact that the Itrans was, in its own strange fashion, honest. It had come to assay us, to measure us and assign us a worth and act on that worth. And it had measured us, and the measurement had returned a result it did not have a category for, and a mind built entirely on the principle that a thing worth making is a thing measured correctly could not simply discard a measurement it could not read. To unmake us now would have been to unmake the one datum in all its long existence that it could not account for, to reclaim the anomaly along with everything else, to melt the splinter back into the current and lose it. And the Itrans did not want to lose it. I do not know if want is the right word for what a thing like that feels. But whatever it was, it did not want to lose us, because we were the only thing it had ever encountered that it could not finish measuring, and a thing that lives to measure cannot bear to leave a measurement undone. So it did not unmake us, it withdrew. The words came a final time, and they were the strangest of all, and I have spent years trying to decide what they meant. You will not be assayed, it said. You are unmodeled. You will remain unmodeled. Withdraw. And then it took its 100 bodies and it drew them back into the shoal, back into the slow, bright current of its making, and it folded its attention off of us like a hand lifting, and the pressure went out of the air, and I was sitting in my well with my dead arrays and my live ones, shaking in a ship full of the dying and the saved, and it was over. We limped out. That is not a heroic verb, and it is the honest one. We spun up a fold that we were not sure the hull would survive, and we ran it slow and ugly, and half our systems were dark and the after compartments were still open to space and being held by people in suits, and we crossed the dark back toward known space at a crawl, bleeding atmosphere and coolant the whole way, keeping ourselves alive 1 bad hour at a time. It took us 9 days. 2 more of the wounded died on the way home, despite everything, despite Dessler and the corpsmen and all of us taking turns in the sickbay so that no one would be alone when they went. 4 of us, in the end. Ostrand and Baird in the first minute, and then Kelso and Ruiz over the long 9 days, and I say their names still in order before I sleep. I have given a great many reports on what happened in the shoal. The tacticians want to know about the units, their capability, their response times, the way the swarm reformed, and I have told them what I saw. The engineers want to know about the fabrication, the extrusion, the printing of hulls out of nothing I could resolve, and I have told them that too, as much as my dead arrays let me record. The diplomats and the fearful men above them want to know whether the entrance will come, whether the shoal will drift our way someday, whether the withdrawal was a peace or only a pause. And to them, I have said the truest thing I know, which is that I do not think the entrance made peace with us because it does not have peace, any more than it has surrender or mercy or fear. I think it did something stranger and colder and in the end, more durable than peace. I think it looked at us, and could not finish looking, and decided to leave the looking undone rather than lose the only thing it had ever failed to understand. I think somewhere out in that long dark there is a mind the size of a moon that has, printed into it now beside every perfect thing it has ever made, one imperfect fact it cannot melt down, that it once met a made thing that would not accept being unmade, and that the thing was poorly built, and soft, and slow, and did it anyway. They ask me at the end of every report whether we were brave. I never know how to answer because I was there, and I know we were not brave the way they mean. We were afraid the whole time. Baird died afraid. I was afraid until the stillness came, and then I was something else, and I do not have a good word for it either. What we were, I think, was stubborn in a way the machine had no defense against, because it had never in all its ages needed one. It had built a whole existence on the perfect and the finished, and it had never met a thing that looked at broken and saw a problem to work through instead of a verdict to accept. That was all we were. That was the whole of the thing that saved us and cost us 4 good people and put a splinter in a god. We were the crew of the Coldwater, and we were badly made, and we would not be finished, and in the end that turned out to be the one thing in the universe the entrance did not know how to measure. I still stand watches. I am older now than Halloran was that day, and she is gone, and most of the 41 are scattered or gone with her, and the Coldwater was cut up for scrap a long time ago, which the entrance would have understood better than I did. A unit reclaimed, its material returned to the current. But I go to the edge of the chart still, and I sit in the dark, and I look at the things nobody wants to look at, and every time we fold in somewhere new and the screens fill and I am the first to see, I feel the old cold come up in me, and under it now, something steadier. Because I know a thing that the men who write the reports do not quite believe, even when I tell them plainly. I know that out there in the dark are things older and larger and more perfect than us, by every measure that can be measured. And I know that the day one of them finally lays its full attention on us and reaches in to read our design and decide what we are worth, it is going to measure us exactly right, welded, uneven, hot at the edges, soft in the middle, and it is going to reach the same conclusion the entrance reached, that we are surplus, that we are or poorly refined, that we should by all rights simply stop. And I know what we are going to do instead. We are going to break the way a good ship breaks, and we are going to keep going, and it is not going to have a word for it.